In 45 years, Prime Minister Narendra Modi is the first Prime Minister to land in Poland since Morarji Desai back in 1979. The timing of this visit coincides with the 70th anniversary of diplomatic relations between the two nations. Now, during his stay in Poland, Prime Minister Modi will meet President Andrzej Sebastian Duda and hold bilateral talks with Prime Minister Donald Tusk. The focus of the visit will focus on strengthening bilateral relations, with discussions likely to cover a wide range of issues, including strategic partnerships, defense cooperation and cultural exchanges. Now, while the European Parliament member Dariusz Joński has termed the visit as very important, the Ministry of External Affairs, or the MEA, has also highlighted historical ties between the two nations, recalling Poland's assistance to Bharat during Operation Ganga in 2022, which facilitated the evacuation of over 4,000 Indian students from Ukraine. And this gesture, along with the historical refuge provided to over 6,000 Polish women and children in Bharat during World War II, are being seen as the cornerstone of good India-Poland ties. But there's more to it. India-Poland ties are perhaps the largest trading in Central and Eastern Europe, two nations with over $3 billion in trade. Indian investment in Poland, bilateral trade of $5.72 billion in FY 23-24. Indian exports to Poland at $3.96 billion. India's imports from Poland stand at $1.76 billion. The cultural connect also is there. Strong tradition of Indology studies in Poland. Sanskrit is being taught in 600-year-old university since 1860. The largest center for Indian studies in Europe is in Warsaw. Ayurveda and yoga are widely acknowledged and also practiced. And then, from Warsaw, Prime Minister Narendra Modi will travel to Ukraine on the first visit by an Indian Prime Minister to Ukraine since the country became independent in 1991. The Prime Minister will travel to the Ukrainian capital Kiev and share perspectives with President Volodymyr Zelensky on a peaceful resolution of Ukraine conflict. What's the significance of this visit? It's the first visit of an Indian Prime Minister to Ukraine in 30 years. It also reflects deepening ties between both Bharat and Ukraine. Discussion on multilateral cooperation with Ukrainian President. Visit to build upon the recent high-level interactions between leaders, and bilateral talks are significant in the wake of Russia-Ukraine conflict. Bharat is very clearly aware that both Moscow and Kiev are yet unwilling to sit at the negotiating table, and this visit happens at a time when there's been an escalation from Ukraine because it's also entered Russian territory with attacks, both drone strikes and territorial strikes. Prime Minister Modi's proposed visit to Kiev will take place amid expectations that it might pave way for a peace process, but will it? The PM earlier had said that Bharat would like to continue to do everything within its means to support a peaceful solution, and it will go there. The visit will present perspectives, Bharat's perspective on how this can be achieved. Ambassador Rajiv Dogra, former diplomat, with us, and Ruslan Botnik, director of Ukrainian Institute of Politics, is also with us. My namaste to both of you. Thank you, gentlemen. Let me first ask you, Mr. Botnik, how do you see this visit, and what are the expectations? Is the focus going to be largely bilateral? Is Ukraine going to tell the Prime Minister Narendra Modi to sit out the conflict conversation?
Hello, colleagues. The Ukrainian expectation from this visit is much deeper and wider than only bilateral negotiation and relationship between our countries, because we recognize India like one of the main leader of the global South countries. And Ukraine is willing that India take participation in the second global peace summit in this autumn, and maybe participation of India also could involve to this summit also another countries from global south. It's only one aspect, but also there is a huge range of questions bilateral questions between countries. Political question, and the Indian role in negotiation between Ukraine and Russia also should be very significant. And there is also economic ties. We have 2 billion international trade each year, near 2 billion, and we have very, very specific trade with pharmaceutical production, food, engines for Indian warships, and so on. There are a lot of small problems, and there are a lot of very high challenges for deepening these cooperations.
But given the conflict with Russia, do you think Ukraine is in a position to work on the aspects economically? Because a lot of it is being drained in the cost of war. In this case, will suddenly, if India has a solution, if PM Modi comes with a workable solution, will Ukraine be amenable? will Kiev and Moscow will agree to sit on the table? Because one of the conditions for Moscow is that they want to be at the table when conversation happens.
It's a very difficult question, but it's easier to understand with comparing with something else. In any case, India is neutral country, is non-alignment country. India not like a China, which is involved in support with Russia, for example. And so the position of India is much better in this negotiation table, comparing with another possible negotiator. It's a huge country with big abilities, with a big influence in the world, and this is quite independent country, even if we are taking account economical cooperation, military cooperation with Russia, but no one in Ukraine thinks that India is dependent on Russia.
Right.
Everyone is understanding that it's only Indian national interests.
So their respect is there, that it's not that they're supporting Russia's invasion of Ukraine, but it's a necessity because there is an oil crisis, and the global energy crisis is also somewhere being countered or met because of Bharat's purchase of crude. Ambassador Rajiv Dogra, the hug in Moscow did not go down with President Zelensky, because that was the same day when a hospital in Ukraine was attacked, and there were some comments that were made. Now, will President Zelensky openly give a warm embrace to Prime Minister Modi? Will Modi be the only leader worldwide who can go to Moscow and also Kiev and hug both leaders and have a conversation? And what does that imply then?
Well, first thing, this attack on hospital, which unfortunately happened during Prime Minister Modi's visit to Moscow, has been talked of from the Western viewpoint quite a lot and given a slant which was quite unnecessary. Does anyone in the West talk about various hospitals in Gaza which were attacked and are being attacked almost on a daily basis by Israel? So I think the hospital thing has been overblown. Now, coming to Mr. Modi's visit to Ukraine, it has many dimensions. Number one, he'll be getting a double briefing. First in Poland, giving Ukraine's viewpoint, and second in Ukraine itself, giving Mr. Zelensky's viewpoint. And Mr. Zelensky at the moment is riding high because he's achieved a certain victory at the moment in Russian territory, which no one expected. At least no one in the global south expected. Maybe people in the West were aware of it. So he feels that at the moment he has an upper hand, both militarily and as well as in possible negotiations whenever they happen. The second thing about Mr. Zelensky is his tendency to be dramatic whenever an important visit takes place. A few months back, there was sort of a worry and concern in Western capitals that whenever President Macron or someone else from UK or Germany visits Ukraine, then nearly sirens keep going off. And they say that these are false alarms, but meant to impress the visiting dignitary that look, Kiev is under attack constantly from Russia, and we are living with a very aggressive country. So Zelensky can be expected to pull off all kinds of scenarios meant to impress Prime Minister Modi. But to be fair, we should realize that when the visits of Western leadership to Kiev have virtually come to a halt, Prime Minister Modi is taking a very bold step at a time when Ukraine is aggressive, when this morning there was a huge drone attack on Moscow.
Yes, at Moscow, yeah.
So these are difficult times for anyone who is attempting to give the message of peace. So I would say that we should not think of destination at the moment in terms of achieving peace, but the beginning of a process which Mr. Modi is going to convey to Mr. Zelensky, that leave aside the temporary ups and downs in the war between Russia and Ukraine, think of the larger picture and think of the people of Ukraine. And I think he's going to reiterate publicly the message that he gave to President Putin.
But Ambassador Rajiv Dogra, But Ambassador Rajiv Dogra and also, the Mr. Botnick, one of the aspects is, and let's address the big elephant in the room. This is not a Ukraine versus Russia fight only. There is a big influence of NATO and that to the US in how things are coordinated and what's happening. The US is also watching. So how much of a US influence or a buy-in is there on Bharat's visit, not just to Kiev, but also Poland? Because Poland is one of the most important allies and, Mr. Tusk is a very strong advocate and very totally anti-Russia there and anti-Putin. So there has to be a buy-in from the NATO powers and largely the US. And US is in the throes of an election campaign right now. Ambassador Rajiv Dogra.
Well, you're very right that there is a third party involved, and the third party very heavily is led by USA. And there are examples from recent past. The people had expected a peace agreement to be reached between Russia and Ukraine almost in the beginning of the war. But then, and this was in Turkey, and then Boris Johnson entered the picture, the former Prime Minister of UK, and he said, no, tear off this draft agreement, we cannot have peace. So there is speculation that the continuation of war in Ukraine serves certain interests in the Western countries, as I said, led by US. Whether that is a fact or not is a different thing. But there is nothing to indicate that US and Western countries are on the side of peace in this particular scenario. The second thing is, and it should hurt Russia, I mean, I'm not speaking on behalf of Russia, but I'm merely analyzing the evidence that is there in Western newspapers. The Wall Street Journal and an important German newspaper reported recently that the Nord Stream gas pipeline was blown up by Ukraine in collaboration with some Polish people. So when you have your important lifeline of energy supply being sabotaged like this is an act of terrorism. So I would say that there is need for restraint on both sides, but there is a need for advisory restraint on the side of NATO countries.
Mr. Botnick, your thoughts?
Yes. There is no simple story about NATO. We need to understand it. It's not such united, like it looks from external, from the NATO. Look at Turkey or Hungary or other countries, which leads quite another policy toward the Ukrainian-Russian conflict than entire NATO. If we are talking about the visit to Poland and Ukraine at the same time, it looks like India coming back to the high policy, to the policy of high powers, mainstays in the world. Because now European continent, European Union and NATO countries, now they are a battlefield between United States and China, from economical, political, from even military side. And it looks like India could be a third player, maybe not the strongest player for nowadays, but India could play a very significant role in peaceful negotiation between the sides in this moment.
Right. Gentlemen, thank you very much for your thoughts. The visit continues. We had some latest pictures of the Prime Minister laying a wreath at the memorial for the martyrs. And thereafter, he has an engagement with the Indian diaspora in Poland later this evening, and there will be continuous broadcast and coverage of that here on CNN News 18. But